Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Broken Beautiful Me, stories of hope, gratitude, and resilience. And I am so excited today because I get to talk to Cleo Childs, and she has released a spoken word poetry album called Moving With. On May 15th, of this album is the culmination of 2.5 years of writing about the journey of grief she experienced after losing her mom to Alzheimer's when she was 28 years old. Her mother was an English major, and her grandmother, one of her editors, was an English teacher for 30 years. So she came by her grief processing tool of writing poetry very handy. With this spoken word poetry album, she hopes to show the path that her grief took from having her mother and losing her mother in the peace and acceptance that she feels now. She also hopes to give an authentic and honest look at what her grief felt like so that other people going through grief don't feel alone and feel community in their grief, which I can't wait to talk about. You can learn more at cleochilds.com. Cleo, welcome so much to the show. It is such an honor to have you here.
Good morning. Yesterday was my fifth wedding anniversary. We went out and we had a great time, just two of us, and we celebrated a friend's birthday. So it is a great day to be able to talk with you. I'm really excited about it. Happy to talk to you.
We're going to let this go wherever it leads us. Before we dig in, for our listeners who may not know about your work, can you give a brief overview of the amazing stuff you're doing in your album?
I'm Cleo Childs. The pen name, my real name is Reese Zahner. And so what I realized that Zahner and my fifth grade graduation ceremony, my principal couldn't pronounce my last name. So I was like, this does not bode well for future if I was ever to do something. And so Cleo is my middle name and Childs is my maternal grandmother, her maiden name. And so it's a name that's really died out in our family. And so I get the joy of being able to bring it back as my pen name. And so I got into writing as a natural processing tool after I lost my mom to Alzheimer's at the age of 28. She got diagnosed when I was 21, and I lost her with about 6 years. She died suddenly when I was 28 on Halloween. I went through two kinds of grief, anticipatory grief, of losing her, and then there was the grief that went through of losing her suddenly. And I think that I thought that I thought I was a pro in grief because I had lost her for, 6 years. And then I went through and I lost her suddenly, and I realized that I was a student of grief. In my grief, the only thing that made it feel better was writing in the way that made it feel honest and authentic to what I was experiencing. I wrote poetry for about 6 months after my mom died. The only thing I would do is I was write because it's the only thing that made it feel a bit better. Never intended to release it. It was just expression. In December, I got inspired by songwriting as a hobby. It made me happy, and I never intended to release anything. In March 2024, I went to a mentorship session to learn about songwriting and to get better in writing. And it was with a record producer of Nashville, who's my producer. And he said, that was amazing. He would produce me. I said, well, this was in my 2024 bingo card. So, but I was not anticipating that. I was so excited. I called all my friends, all my family. I was like, I'm going to have a record. And they're like, what? And I was like, yes, apparently I had no idea, but I'm good. And, someone sees value in it. But I continued and I released it with the hope, which I've now been confirmed that my hope, at least for one person, is meaningful. My record of grief looked like for me. The reason why it was important is when I was in grief at the very beginning, I bought books and journals to intellectualize grief. I realized it was a defense mechanism because I had to feel it. I couldn't, when I was reading all these books, understand how when I was in disillusion with God and anger, and I was in all these deep emotions, how anyone could get to peace and acceptance. And so, because I didn't have that answer, I was trying to figure out how could this happen, and I tried looking for it, and it was something that I couldn't understand. And so, I kind of released it with the intention of being able to provide an answer that I was questioning because I imagine I believe that we are more alike than dissimilar. And I imagine if I was kind of questioning about how someone could go, if I was feeling disillusionment with God, how someone could go to peace and acceptance, I imagine it's probably not a question that's unique to me. And so that was my answer 2.5 years later. That's me.
I think it's a beautiful expression of both grief and celebration of the life of your mother and who she was. There's sort of the pen name because I love strong women, and I love that you are celebrating the strong maternal heritage you have with your name, Cleo Childs. That's just so beautiful. With your mother, we talked about two kinds of grief, and my husband's father had dementia as well, and I would often talk to my mother-in-law about it and so on goodbye
Mhm.
because cases of a person slowly dissipate. Hello, hello.
Sorry about that. Technology is wonderful when it works. I broke code when I was 21. Since then, I have no clue how technology works.
I was doing an interview last week and my lighting decided it wanted to be at the disco. So, and I couldn't stop the interview. So the light was like lighter and dark. And I was like, okay, here we go.
That's when you put on ABBA and
Yes,
you do some
dancing queen, that's my jam.
I turned 30 this year, and my 30th birthday, my husband, he's like, do you want me to plan it? And I said, no, I'm going to play my own because I love to play at parties. And it was called Give Me 30. It's an ABBA themed 30th birthday party. And I got a sparkly jumpsuit, and I found these masks on Etsy of ABBA. And so we all wore ABBA masks, and I had a sparkly jumpsuit, and we did Dancing Queen, and I had like Dancing Queen banners and everything.
You're going to need to email me a picture of this because I need
I got a photographer to take pictures of it too. So I hired a photographer and we rented out a private room at a bar, and it was behind the bookshelf. And so it was Dancing Queen. We all dressed up in 70s gear. It was an amazing 30th, but I hired a photographer to take pictures of it. So I can send you my 30th birthday party because I have pictures of me and my sparkly jumpsuit. And it says, I had a little sash that said, and then I had like a headband that said WTF, I'm 30. But I digress. So I just love anytime I can talk about ABBA, I'm happy to.
Okay, we made soul sisters here because I am an ABBA lover. I remember standing on my best friend's couch with hairbrushes. We were ABBA. That's what we grew up on. And when Dancing Queen came on, yeah, you bet it away. We worked every did. So I do want that picture. I want to talk to you about the long goodbye. Yes, you said in your introduction that you thought you would breathe, and then your mom died suddenly. You found out that instead of being professionally grieved, you were a student.
Mhm.
And that truly resonates with me because I think at different stages of our life, we realize that I had that figured out and I didn't. There's many times that I thought I had things figured out.
Wears many mass names, emotions. It's amorphous. I wrote in a I wrote in a poem that I'm putting on a different album that'll be released at some point. But initially, it was dreams, how amorphous, how docile, how are the amorphous creatures to change something like this. But I believe that not only dreams are amorphous, but grief is amorphous because I thought I knew it. I thought that I was intimately familiar with grief. And what I realized is that maybe it was an acquaintance of mine, and then it became a neighbor, and then it became a intruder into my home, and then eventually it became a friend. I think that it becomes It takes so many forms, takes so many fashions, and I thought that I knew it, and I realized I did not until I think that and it's very multifaceted. It kinda reminds me of maybe prism, right? It's kind of like you can have the sunbeam of going in, and you say that this is what grief is, but what you realize is that it's very multifaceted. There's many different colors. I thought that, like, for example, that when I was going through it, or when I thought about what would it be like to lose my mother, because I knew that I was going to. I was anticipatory grief. There was the anticipation into it. I thought I knew. I thought that because I had done it for so long, not successfully, but, um, not successfully, but kind of stoically, I would say. I kind of did it stoically, that it would, when she passed, that it would be easy somehow. I thought that it would be easy, that I had been doing it not successfully, but stoically, and kind of taking it on the face a little bit. And then I realized that when she actually passed, that it was as devastating to me as if I never had the anticipatory grief. That I wasn't prepared, that I didn't have like a ramp up where I became numb to it, or I somehow became it that it would hurt. I thought it would hurt so much less because I've been doing it for so long. And then she died suddenly, and it hurt as much as I think as if I never had the anticipatory grief to begin with. What I learned, what I thought what I thought is that when I went into grief, that it would be all shades of gray. I think I confused grief with depression at the beginning. I think that they may be they're not, because I've dealt with depression beforehand, and I thought, but it's so much more painful, it's so much more different. But what I thought is that when you are in grief, that it would be shades of gray, or it would be one gray. And I realized that some days I was light gray. Oh, it didn't feel as bad. Some days I was dark gray, and it felt much worse. Some days I wasn't gray at all. I was red or blue, and some days I was all the colors, and some days I was no colors. It became much more, not only it, be, it was much more intangible than I thought it was going to be. It was much more not deceiving necessarily, but unexpected. It was much more unexpected.
Yeah.
And it kind of
Um,
brought me to my knees. It brought me to my knees in a way that I was not anticipating, because I thought I had been doing great for so long. In a one way, in one form or fashion, it kind of would numb me to the second one. And it didn't numb me at all. I think that that made me angry. There's a poem in the album, it's about anger. And I think what the anger was is the fact that I realized that I was powerless to grieve. I'm a recovering perfectionist. I'm a recovering control person. And I thought I could control grief. I thought I could manipulate it a little bit. I thought I could fight it. I thought that I was more powerful. I could, through pure force of will, be able to kind of bend it. And when I realized, and I think that that's where the anger came from, was the powerlessness to it, because I realized I was in an unfair fist fight, that I was going to lose, that I was up against, there was no chance of me winning. And so I made the conscious decision to feel everything and to surrender and to grief. And by doing that, and by changing the perspective of what I was doing, I think that it probably allowed me to move with grief. It allowed me to have this perspective of move with grief, because I wasn't trying to fight it. I was trying to figure out how to live with it. And which is something I still try to figure out now.
I mean, that's something I try to figure out as well. On my day-to-day walk, but it shifts. It shifts with time, with certain things that happen in your family, like certain milestones, birthdays, anniversaries, all that stuff. There's a surge of grief that you maybe don't expect that's going to bubble up, but it hits you when you least expect it. You know, you think that you are, as you said, you think you've got it figured out and you're fine, and then you turn the page and it's just another chapter of your daily process. Um, I love what you said about, um, that's so profound about how like neighbor, intruder, roommate, friend, how your relationship with grief changed over time as you learn to sit with it. And that's one of the things that I think is the most powerful thing in my grief journey. And it sounds like you're saying the same, is that um, you don't have to do anything, but that sitting with it and looking it in the face, uh, that's where the real healing and growth. Would you agree with that statement?
I've heard it to a certain extent. I kind of go and I say that for me, grief, I sat at the foot of grief and I was taught by it and I was a student. And I don't know if that means that it has to be the way that you interact with grief. I think it is grief could just, it doesn't have to mean anything. I think that's true. I think it can mean something, but I think it's equally valid if nothing of this learning process comes from grief. I think that I've interacted with a lot of people and they have many different grief journeys. And I think their grief is so individualistic. It has commonalities, but it's so individualistic that in every grief journey is valid. I became a student of grief and I learned from it and I grew with it. But I think that it's as equally valid even if you don't grow with it. I think you don't necessarily have to grow with grief. I think you can potentially, but I think that doesn't, if you realize or you feel that I didn't grow with grief, it doesn't make me different or anything like that. It just did not, it was something in my life that was a chapter of my life. I think that is equally valid a perspective as one that goes and as one that learns from it.
That's a great
Yeah.
point.
And I tried to be, I was taught that because of, as someone I know, I was listening to it and it somehow came to me is that they said it doesn't have to mean anything. It can just hurt and you can feel like you've lost someone. I, with my grief journey is that it did mean something to me, but I don't think it has to mean something to everyone. I think, and they're equally valid perspectives. I think you can just miss the person and you can feel like they're no longer there. And that's as valid as me becoming friends with grief as you can just say, I, I'm angry at it and I don't want it to happen. And I think every relationship with grief is valid. I think that there doesn't have to necessarily be a lesson through grief, but at the same time, even if there's not a lesson in it, it is still as equally valid as if there is one. And I learned from it, but I think that you could equally not, and it could equally be still as a valid experience.
Yeah. Um, that is very true. And, I found, and I know that anybody else who's lost me, like you said, you ordered a lot of books, as did I. And, there's a lot of different belief systems and approaches to grief, but you're right. It is as individual as the fingerprint. And like to depend on the relationship that you have uh, with that person. And so everything is okay. All of your feelings, all the feelings that anybody feels are valid, right? I remember when I went to grief counseling, when my son passed, because I had no idea how to navigate it. And I was very much like a control person. I like to have my ducks in a row. And then all of a sudden I was like, I have no idea what to do. What do I do here? Right? It was just such a period of groundlessness. Um, and for me, going counseling, one of the things that the counselor said was, that's okay. It's okay for you to be that way. Like, just, it was almost like in my journey, it was almost like I needed to hear that little bit of permission, I guess. because I'm so used to trying to be in control. And I just happened to meet the right counselor who's like, hey, what you feel is what you feel. It's valid. All of it, every single bit of it. Um, and I think that that's if I like when I look back, that was one of the turning points for me where I was felt like I was given permission, not that I needed it, but I guess I did in my own say. And when things would bubble up, she would say, "Look at your brain, so I didn't deal with that part of it." She just didn't. It was never like I remember going in one day and she said, "I said I am backpedaling right now. I cannot stop thinking about this one very specific piece. Event was in Steven and I don't know what to do. And I'm going backwards and yeah. Right. And she was like, "Mm, you're not going backwards. Your brain is healed enough now that your brain's telling you you're ready to look at that part of it." And I went, okay. And it was just such a, I was like, "Oh, so this is the way that I'm doing it. It's okay." And I had to convince myself that at first that there was all these different ways to do it, and all those different ways so perfectly come. But it was like I don't know if it was my schooling or what, but it's like I needed some sort of permission structure. Do you think that have you talked to people who feel, kind of that push and pull of how they feel they should breathe and what you say?
I think what I feel and I feel and when I explain to people when they lose someone and they come to me and they say, you've done this before. What is the advice? I think it's a very interesting kind of hard position to be in because it's so individualistic. What I always say is, this is my experience.
Yeah.
This is what I went through. I think that there's commonalities between people's grief journeys. But what I say is that with my experience, I realized or it felt like grief was a river. Rivers flow upward sometimes. Rivers flow down. They have twirling. They have rapids between. Sometimes it feels like there's a calm bit, and then out of nowhere, there's a bend in the turn, and you don't know what's going to come, and then there's a rapid into it. I think that there's some forward progression with grief because it's time. I think it's a lot of things I say is time. And in the poem I wrote, there'll be released another album. The thing that I realized, I said, time presses me grudgingly, forcing me to continue moving, to think I'm immune as folly, believing I am as human.
It's beautiful.
I think time factors. And as much as I didn't want it to, with time, these rapids became farther and farther in between. They still occurred, and maybe they were less, but they still happened. And I think that I thought that that would not happen to me. At the very beginning, when I was going through intense grief, right as I lost my mom, I thought, how is this what's going to be like forever? I was barely hanging on. And I went underneath the water. I went into deep isolation for 6 months. And then my head rose above the water a little bit after, inch by inch, centimeter by centimeter,
Yeah.
bring on 2.5 years later. I'm still in the river, but it's not in the same way that I was at the very beginning of when I lost my mom in the first, week afterward. But I think time plays a huge part in being able to solve it. I'm expanding on the album in a book. And what I say is that I went into a cave and now I re-entered the world, kind of. And I guiltily looked forward to it. I think it's very interesting is I think there's chapters. I think time played a huge part in it. And I think permission is huge. I think that there is a huge part in it because, and I think that I have this theory that it's the hardest time to be a grieving person in human history. But I think one of the things that comes into this is that we're told that there's good emotions and there's bad emotions. And with grief, there's a lot of these quote unquote bad emotions, which is despair and anger and isolation and being upset and distancing and maybe, just, but there's also, but I think the thing is that what I realize is those are emotions and there's equally valid as happiness and joy. And there's equally valid as camaraderie and compassion. And I think that when I realized that I'm just feeling emotions that were valid, that helped to allow me to feel them without judgment. Yeah. Because I judged myself a lot for feeling them initially. I thought "This it took pressure off of me, I think, when I realized that it's okay. Maybe it's okay for me to feel angry. It's one of these things that growing up, I was told, you don't need to feel angry. Angry, you don't want to be angry. It's valid for me to feel angry. It's totally valid and it's okay. And I think I allowed myself to have permission to feel things that were quote unquote bad, which allowed me to be able to open myself up to writing and processing, but also to open myself up to not judging myself as harshly, which allowed, I think, for healing.
So do you feel, yes, anger is such a normal emotion for people to experience, but you're right, you do have labels of good and bad emotion. Do you feel like, well, if you had not really looked at your anger and kind of processed it, that it would have been difficult for you to move to the place that you are now?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And do you feel that that period of isolation that you had, that really, I mean, isolation would work for some and not for others. Do you feel like that period of isolation allowed you to process those emotions in that way?
I think it allowed for me to take the time that I needed
Yeah.
and to do it.
Yeah.
And think that's what it allowed. I think that's what it was, is with the isolation. And not everyone goes in isolation. Not everyone has the ability or the yeah, it's not even ability. It's what I'm looking for is just the time to go into isolation. Not a lot of people have the capacity, not the capacity, but the just, I had no kids. It was just me and my husband and my dog at that point. So I think that I had not only the ability to go into isolation, but it was possible for me to. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I think by going into isolation, it allowed me to really sit with myself. It allowed me to figure out, what is this thing going on for me? I put up blinders to the world for a little bit. I think that for me, the isolation was necessary to be able to really take a look at what was going on without distraction. That's what it was. My isolation was pretty much me removing every distraction. And I think what happened is my world condensed on itself. I think it completely, it was like a star, right? It just condensed on itself. And the isolation was what became of that metamorphosis. It was kind of like I can say that I took my soul down to a chemical level. I basically rebuilt myself. I disintegrated. My entire life disintegrated. Who I was disintegrated. And I rebuilt myself from a chemical level. And I think that the isolation period was basically my cocooning of my soul. In the same way that butterflies go to a chrysalis stasis. That's what my isolation was.
Yeah. I mean, and when if you look back over, all the religious sects from every religion, there's a huge component, um, that talks about isolation, its connection to, and like how, many prophets in various religions religions throughout history uh, have taken that period and how they essentially have changed and grown and become more enlightened about, their belief system. The same can be applied to grief in any ways. If you don't have to be, um, prophet, but just sometimes tuning out the noise because it's a very noisy world that we live in. We'd say, uh, sometimes tuning that out is the only way that you can really hear what your soul is trying to say to you. You can't hear it alone.
What isolation did for me is it connected me to my humanity. It
Yeah.
connected me to my humanness.
Yeah.
It reminded me that I was human
Mhm.
and I had to sit with myself. I think that's one of the things too, is that we're in a world, to your point, it's very noisy, but it's also primed and we're incentivized to be distracted.
Yeah.
We're incentivized for our attention to be drawn and put in all different places. I, in isolation, I removed all that distraction. I didn't go on the internet. I read books, but I basically wrote. That was the only thing that I did. But I think that what it did is it connected me to my humanness. It took me back to my humanity. It it took me and put me at the I sat with myself for the first time. I used to be a gnat fly that would go and I wanted to do everything. I wanted to be everything to everyone. I wanted to do everything. Not to say that I don't want to, go and enjoy life or anything like that, but I think that the intention was wrong with that. It wasn't pure in the way that I wanted to like soak up the world. It was that I didn't know who I was. And I was trying, and I was very much like a amorphous kind of liquid that would go and fit into everyone's cup. And I didn't know who I was. And I think I became solid in isolation because for the first time, I had to sit with myself and figure out, who are you? That's what it was, is who are you? What do you think? What do you feel? It became a not only a chrysalis and a metamorphosis of myself, it became a solidity. Like I solidified myself. And I think I had a much better understanding of who I am as a person through isolation. And I think that I think mainly through suffering, because I think suffering I say, I don't know if I'm right or not. My thought is that intelligence can be learned from books because we have neuroplasticity, right? Your brain changes. You can literally make yourself smarter by reading everything. But I think that wisdom only is taught through experience. And so I became wise, more wise. I'm not even sure I'm wise, but I had wisdom now for the first time that I could then apply to figuring out who I am. I think that's one of the things that came out of it was the wisdom is, who are you? Not want you to be, not the world wants you to be, but who the first time are you? And I only did that because I isolated, because I was suffering. And I think through suffering, I became connected to myself for the very first time. And I solidified who I am. What do I stand for? What are my thoughts rather than what are the thoughts that are put onto me? Because I isolated and I only had myself to be able to interact with, really.
So for somebody who one of our listeners, for example, might be out there and they are going through and they feel the need to isolate. They would like to be able to do that. Like you said, not everybody can do that. They have, different responsibilities. They have, big kids and so what would be some simple tips that you could give them, if they can't isolate like you could, how can they find that stillness to process all of that emotion?
I think there's two things that come up for me. One is what I would say is to give yourself grace. What I think by that is you're going through something incredibly difficult, probably one of the hardest things in a human existence to go through. Mhm. I gave a lot of other people grace before I gave myself it. So I would say, and then I realized I gave myself grace too over time for going through something incredibly difficult where there's no roadmap that's so individualistic. Mhm. You're, some days I was like, I don't know what I can do, but I realized I was doing the best I could. And that looked different every day. And some days I wasn't doing the best I could. And that's okay too, because it's so hard. So I would say, give yourself grace and permission and know that you're valid and worthy and meaning and you mean something. I think too is I used creative writing as a processing tool. I think what I would say is if you can't go into isolation, I totally understand. If that's not even the path that you want to take, I totally understand the path that my grief took. I think that there is something so that it not joyous, but it doing creative expression of any kind was the thing that filled my cup up. I think creation, whatever creation looks like for you, maybe that could be able to help a little bit. Or find that thing that makes it hurt a little bit less, makes it a little bit more manageable. Figure out how to do more of that in your day. That for me was writing. It might be going on a walk. It might be spending time with your family. It might be cooking or baking. I think it's finding those little pockets of joy because they exist, or pockets of contentment because they exist. I think it's just being open to figuring out what those are and being able to incorporate more of that into your life.
Yeah,
That's, yeah.
I would agree. I mean, and even I'm just thinking that my only mother and how years later at Christmas when I'm making for this, that is like, it's almost like a meditation and celebration. And so you're right. You don't have to necessarily be in isolation. We can find those moments and giving ourselves the grace to to be able to do that is so important. Um, you know, I, for women, it's difficult to give ourselves space. We struggle with that. It's it's the tough one, isn't it?
It's incredibly tough. I think too is that the other thing I would say, it's why I call it moving with, is at the end of the poem or at the end of the album, it goes, there is no moving on, there's just moving with. I remember what was, I accept what is.
It's,
I think you move with people. I think it's what I realized. I didn't lose my mother. She just changed. And I moved with, I gave her a birthday party a year and a half after I lost her with all of her friends at her favorite restaurant. And it was joyous. And I have a little candle that I have on my desk that I go and I light when I want to feel connected to her. And I have pictures of her around my office. And I moved with her. I didn't move on from her. I think that's the other thing is what I realized when I started to realize that the grief that I felt for me was I was grieving how I knew her before. But that is I still don't know her now. You know, it's one of these things that I still take the lessons with her. I wrote in a poem is that, you know, I appreciate her kindness when it's given to me. I appreciate her gentleness when people treat me gently. Then I appreciate her courageousness when I watch others be courageous. I see my mother now in other people and she moves with me. I'm never moving on from her. I think that that was the other thing is when I realized that I did not move on from losing my mother. I just moved with her and I bring her with me. I talk about her all the time. She's around me all the time. I have her pictures everywhere,
yeah.
you know? I think that that really also helped that perspective because I thought I lost her. And in some way, I did lose her. I lost her physically. But I think what was interesting is that the second that lost her, because I was with Alzheimer's, she didn't know who I was. At the end of it, she didn't know who she was. It was, and we wanted her to go. And I think that's because I thought that it would free her. And somehow it freed me up to connect with her again. By losing her, I regained her because it freed me up to have a new relationship with her. And I think that I moved with my mother. I never moved on for her. And I think that by taking that perspective, it also made it so much easier for me now to incorporate her in my life.
Moving with is, I mean, it's the band, really, just those two words, because many people who agree do hear words like yeah. That's a tough thing to hear. And I'm very much like you. I I celebrate the people that I have lost, and they do give me throughout my life and inspire me, and I continue to learn from them years. Um, because we are, we came from it. I often think, when my mother died, and I remember reading, and then again when my son passed, I remember reading the fetal maternal or 10 years. And so there's and it's science, but it's basically that there's an exchange of mother and child cells. So that there's some of the mother cells and some of the child cells in each other's bodies, and that they're still studying it, but that years and years later, like over 30 years later, you will find some fetal cells in a mother's cells, and sometimes they move to the brain as well. And so they talk about this kind of maternal connection that you have to children, and that it extends both ways. And I used to think about that and think, I'm so connected. There's cells somewhere out there that we're still sharing. Um, and just finding that place in peace here is so beauty. Um, and one of the things because I want to talk about your book, we're talking a lot about it, but I want about something that you wrote. She pours in. I mean, I could cry now even thinking about it. It's just so incredibly beautiful. Um, your words, she pours in. And would you mind sharing some of that with our audience?
Yeah. So this was actually, which is, it's, I wrote it in the middle of grief. I wrote it in the middle of grief at the very beginning of, no, I'd say about maybe first 2 months.
Okay.
And it was my understanding of how can I connect with her, this idea of connecting with her. And it was actually the combination of two poems that put them together because I realized that they're intrinsically combined with each other. And I wrote them around the same time. And it's physics says energy can neither be created nor destroyed. I believe my mother follows the same rules. She is lost to me in body, but I find her spirit inhabiting those around me. I am grateful for her kindness when it is given to me. I appreciate her gentleness when someone treats me gently. I admire her courage when I watch others be courageous. She is everywhere when I allow myself to see her. When I open myself to her, she pours in. My mother grants me an audience every time I catch my reflection. She escapes through my eyes, their shade reminiscent of the magnolia tree she planted. Her laughter hibernates my throat, dormant until someone clever entertains her. She leaks from my fingertips, a tap of wisdom I welcome to overflow on my page. The words she mispronounced in my presence, I butcher with a new audience. During her passing, she molded me, shaping me into her earthly vessel. I am her legacy, the incarnation of her life's work, her representative to life.
And that's beautiful. I really don't. I'm having difficulty forming words. It's just so incredibly honest.
It kind of goes back to this idea of I realized that I could move with her.
Yeah.
And that was my understanding of trying to understand that, of how can I move with her. That was grappling with this idea. And that's what I realized is that I appreciate her so much more because I see her in others.
Absolutely. And you talk about one of the things you said about your mom's legacy. And um, for our listeners, I really encourage you to go to Cleo's website because there's some beautiful pictures there that to me just translate into joy. But you talked about your mother's kindness and what a beautiful legacy that was to leave. And I listened to a podcast where you said, and I'm paraphrasing here, so excuse me, when you are kind, you feel close and accessible.
Mhm.
And that's so incredibly beautiful because I use gratitude, and I use gratitude as part of my grief journey, not to be grateful for the situation and myself in, but to look around and see that there was still goodness around me. And I would say that, when I look for gratitude and I find gratitude, I feel see them all now. And you said something along the same lines about kindness. What do you think about those kind of higher vibration emotions and what they allow us to see?
What they allow us to see is I believe that we are more connected than we think that we are. I don't think we're disparate. I don't think we're separate. I think that we connect with each other. If I'm kind to someone, when I am kind, not only is that the lesson that my mother taught me, that's my mother's kindness coming through. So my mother is now able to be kind, or she's brought back. But that person goes and takes that kindness, and maybe they go, they're kind to another person. It becomes a chain reaction of this idea of my mother's now being moved through other people. I think, to me, what kindness and what gratitude do is they allow us to be appreciative, to appreciate things and to appreciate people. And I think it doesn't necessarily mean to, I think there's a different way that I see it. What I say is I would never ask what happened to me to happen to me. And I would never give up the lines and the gifts that has come from it. I am I'm softer, I think, and more still, more empathetic. I give myself grace, no more grace. I give myself more grace, and I'm more giving of grace to others. I think it's made me a kinder, better, gentler human being. I think that losing my mother to me made me wise. I think it made me soft. I think it made me so much more appreciative of life. And I think the reason why I say that is because I realize the finiteness of it. I realized for the first time that nothing is given. I think I grew up, and I think most people do. I think it's I have a theory. I have lots of theories that it's anthropologically important that we think that we're going to live forever. I think the reason why is probably if we didn't think that we were going to live forever, then we wouldn't be the people that would go off and go into the wilderness, go and find new pastures and go explore and move out and migrate, because we would stay around the campfire and we would not go anywhere. We thought we were going to live for ever, or if we thought that we were going to die. I think that by realizing that there's a contract that I entered into with life, is that there is death. That is the contract, and I have no control over it. Every day I'm grateful. Every day I'm grateful. Every person I am grateful, and I bathe with people, and I think it's made me hyper aware of the good, but also it's made me hyper aware of how I can contribute to the good. I think it's made me so much more present with people, especially my mother. That was the big lesson that I think I learned from my mother is because it was degenerative, every day was going to be the best day I was going to have with her. I knew when she got diagnosed that there was going to be a day where I was going to hear my name being said from her lips for the last time. I knew that knowledge. And every day I bathed in her saying my name because I knew that there was going to be a day where I couldn't hear it. But why does that lesson not translate over into my husband? Mhm. So I go and every day he says, I love me. When he says, I love you, I bathe in it. In the same way I did when I knew that my mother was going to stop saying my name because I know one day I'm going to not hear him say it anymore. And so I am so grateful for it in a way that I was not beforehand because I think I appreciate the finiteness of things. I understand the finiteness of things and I appreciate them and the gifts that I find when they're given to me. And I'm grateful for that lesson. And I wish I didn't have to learn it, but I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, I talked to someone recently who called it the gifts of desperation. And it's true. You never want to learn those lessons, but they do change your path. And in some ways, I mean, you talked about staying safe around the campfire, but in some ways, finding out, just that not everyone's given, and that we have to be so each day to the fullest and appreciate what is around. I don't know about you, but for me, that actually made me want to kind of step away from the campfire a little bit more and explore and see and do and meet and connect with other people and communicate. Um, I think I realized the importance of that as well. Did you feel that same thing? Well, we had talked about, that we're all in this together. Did you feel that same thing?
Last night was my fifth wedding anniversary. And we went out to Fort Worth, 'cause where I live. And what I realized is I had fun, but I did it not in the way that I did when I was 21 or 20. I danced because I wanted to dance. I didn't care with the fact that maybe that comes with age, but I reveled and spending that night with my husband and going out and dancing. And I went up and if I wanted to talk to someone, because I'm 99% extroverted according to a test, and I think that 1%, was missing from I somehow accidentally like clicked a C instead of a B, and that's how I got a 1% missing. You know, I think I went in and I didn't, it was, I didn't care. Yeah, I can't dance. I'm dyspraxic, but I like to dance. And I danced because it was my fifth wedding anniversary and I was going, but I think that in that when I was 20, I was like, oh, I can't dance. Oh, I'm going to have to stay here in the corner and, just kind of not go in. And now this is my fifth wedding anniversary. I think it freed me. It's like the knowledge of it frees me to be able to grasp onto joy. I embrace joy and I grasp it and I love it. And and when it comes up, I appreciate it and I revel in it. I revel in it and I don't care to the same extent that I did of what others think about me.
Yeah.
I have to go back and I think, I'm having fun. And you know what's crazy? They always say this, no one was on that dance floor last night. I started the dance floor because I didn't care.
Right.
Like I'm 30. It's my fifth wedding anniversary. I like this song. I'm going to go dance. And wouldn't you know it? And I don't want to say that I'm the domino that, went and put importance on myself or anything like that. But I looked around and about a minute later, that dance floor was full. And I feel like maybe I contributed to that, maybe. But I think that that's what it taught me. And that's what it feels is I give myself permission to do into it and to go and explore and to wring every single drop from life, you know,
Mm.
and to not wait and to not be bashful and not to say how I used to say is, oh, I love this song. I wish I would go dance. I say, I love this song. I'm going to go dance. I think that's perspective, it shifted.
Yeah. Um, so from your experience with grief, so there's a lot of listeners out there, and I work extensively with the grief community. So from your experience, if you had three things that you could tell people who are grieving right now, um, or people who are wanting to support someone who's grieving, like, what would you say to them?
Give yourself grace and give grace to others. I think number one. I think two is I wrote in a poem once that well-meaning sympathies begin to lash. I think, and also what I learned from that is people know not what they do. I think we are imperfect. We are imperfect people. I think we care deeply. And I think sometimes we don't have the words to show that. And we don't know what that way is to do it until we do it in a way that's not optimal. I think people, though, what I realized is that they do care. And I looked at the intent behind it rather than the execution of it. And once I did that, I gave a lot more gratitude and a lot more grace to people around me. I think also, so I'd say grace, they don't know what they do. They're trying. If there's trying, there's intent behind the try, then I would give credence and I would give a lot of weight to the intent rather than the execution because maybe that has failed, but they tried and I appreciate the effort. Now I do.
Yeah.
I would say another piece is to, I think it comes down to this idea of permission
Mhm.
to feel, to not do, and permission to feel
Yes.
without
Yeah.
judgment. I think that I judged myself a lot from what I was feeling. I said, I shouldn't, this is why am I feeling anger rather than I'm anger. And that's valid. I'm feeling bitterness and that's valid. I think, yeah. And I'm feeling happiness in the middle of grief and that's valid. I think that I gave myself, I would say, by what I learned and what I would say to you is there is no such thing really as good or bad emotions. They're emotions and we're human and we are emotional creatures, you know, and to see what those emotions are saying. I think emotions can be great teachers. What are they? Like anger, for example? Glennon Doyle, I love Glennon Doyle. She says
Mhm.
anger is a emotion because it tells you something. It tells you something about what the situation is. You're angry at something. Well, what is that thing? They say get curious about your emotions. Don't judge them, but get curious. And then I would say my third thing is that kind of touched on is there could be pockets of joy and grief. There can be, or at least things to make it. And I would say, one, don't judge yourself if you feel, or try not to feel guilty that you feel pockets of joy and grief. I did at the beginning.
I did
I would
too.
I would say, find out what is the thing that makes it hurt a little less and see if you can do more of that. For me, it was writing. Writing was the only thing that made it hurt a little less. And so I incorporated writing. And I didn't do it. And I think that I kind of at the beginning felt guilty about that. But I felt like I was trying to numb myself. And it's not that I was trying to numb myself, or it's not that I was trying to not acknowledge my grief and to distance myself from it. What I was doing was I was trying to figure out ways to also fill my cup up. When I had no energy, I had nothing. I was depleted. I was an empty bucket. That made me put one or two drops of water in my bucket. And that's not selfish, that's self-care. And I realized that that's okay for me to do that. That's okay. I'm not going and I'm not saying I don't love my mother any less because I'm writing. It doesn't mean that I don't miss her anymore because I'm writing. It just means that I'm trying to also be able to do something in the middle of grieving her and the loss of her that makes me feel it hurt a little bit less. And that's okay. And I would say 5,000 see if you can incorporate whatever that is, if you find it a little bit more in your life, and to do it without judgment and to do it because it's self-care, and self-care is not selfish.
It's not. And if we think about what our loved ones would want for us, know, it would be all true. So feeling guilt about it, sometimes I would think, well, what would my mom want me to be doing right now? She always wanted me to be happy. She wanted me to be happy. She wanted me to be a good person. And so I'm doing, it's okay if I'm having those pocket things and spreading around. That's okay. Um, so what would you say? I mean, this has been an incredible journey for you. And I have to say throughout the show, please, you need to go to Cleo's website. You need to read some of her work, and you need to listen to some of this poetry because it's incredible. But what has been the most surprising thing that you've learned about yourself that you didn't expect was going to come out of this? But you're like, oh my God. And you did learn about yourself. You perfect journey.
I can write.
What can you write?
I had no idea. I only wrote research papers. Grandma put me through the ringer. I can write.
Yeah.
That's what I learned. I had no idea. I never tried writing before this. And I think also I learned through writing that I have a perspective
Mhm.
and I have a voice and I can use my voice. And that I think the number one thing that I learned, which brings me such joy, is that we are more similar than separate.
Yeah. It's it's a beautiful lesson to learn and much needed in today's world. We all need to take a lesson and realize we're all connected and harmless. Um, in my gratitude group, I have a gratitude group called Just One Good Thing, and I started it in the depths of my own grief, um, because I had a younger son who deserved to have a life. And so we use gratitude in the little thing. And I called it just one little thing because there was days that it was hard to find just anything. And so we would do that at the dinner table. And that was how we tethered ourselves to the present moment. Didn't mean things were good, but it meant that there was still good around us, even on. So that's kind of how I launched the group. So for example, today I'm grateful for um, cooler temperatures, allergy minutes because I live in the South. I live, um, cooperating Labrador retrievers. And I am mostly thankful for meeting you and being able to chat to you about your beautiful poetry. When you were reading She Pours In, I was internally celebrating my own mother as well. And so your writing is an incredible gift. So that's what I'm thankful for. What do you think?
My husband. I adore my husband. He has been my best friend. He is my favorite person in the whole world. He is the love of my life. He is the best person I know. He accepts me for who I am without trying to change who I am to better fit him. He loves me wholeheartedly and fiercely. And he is good.
Mm.
He is good. He is the best thing in my life. He is my home, and I'm grateful for my home.
That's beautiful. Wait, you're gonna have me in deep here. It's beautiful. Um, and I feel like I should do a shout out to my husband to this video. But um left him off the list so I get that ready. But um it's and it is as simple as that, as the gratitude in the little things, the people who accept you and love you and let you be who you are. Um and I can almost feel that supportive relationship when I need to heal. There's such a freedom and honesty to your work. And I think that that doesn't come about with its when to make the people who love you and need to feel great. And that's when I look at what I do, I could never do it. I just couldn't. I leave base. Um, and so that is one big thing, I think, for sure. Um, Before we close out this beautiful discussion, I just want you to let our audience know where they can find your book. Um, Tell us about your website and any upcoming projects, anything that you want to share with us before we.
Yeah, so you can find it at cleochilds.com. So CLEOCHILDS.com. I put the album out on all the platforms, so you can go listen to it. It's should be there. And then there's pictures of my mother, and there's kind words people have said about it. And there's also, if you're visual, I put the poems out there. So if you want to listen to them, but you also want to read along, or you just want to read them separately, be able to do that. And then I would say that the next project is I'm expanding on the album by adding it. I had to with the album, it was only 14 tracks, but I wrote a lot about the journey of grief when I was going through it. And I wanted to, I want to, so I'm working on it, is to expand it. So, because I think I went through things that were not isolating to me, but I felt I put it in them. And I want to be able to put it out in case someone else is kind of going through a similar situation where they feel isolated and they're the only ones that maybe this happened to. And granted, only went through my journey and I can only write about that. But I am expanding on it. So I am writing the book. So I'm compiling it. I'm getting edited right now. And then I have an album that will be coming out eventually. I'm really excited I realized I had something to say about grief. I didn't realize I had something to say about being a woman. And I do. And I did. I wrote an entire album in 1 week. I got very inspired and I wanted to write about different stories and experiences I know of I haven't heard in the media before. I wanted to talk about different women that I know. I know these women. I am these women in some regards. And I knew and I realized that I had heard a lot of stories, but I hadn't heard stories about women that I knew. And I wanted to tell their stories. And so I did. And so we're figuring out when we want to release it. But I realized I had something to say, not only about grief, but about being a woman. And so I'm telling stories about women who I have not heard their stories told before, but I know them. And so that, at some point.
Um, I really wanted to, because I agree. There are so many stories about women that you get told, and we're really excited to listen to that. Do you promise that you'll come back when the album is released? You come back.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a wonderful, delightful conversation. Of course I will. I love you. Please. Yes. Yes,
I
yes,
know,
yes.
because we're mutual out fans, the next time you come on the show, we'll bring some music into this as well. So
Not from I will be singing it because I would that would get your subscribers would go down immensely if I started to sing because I can't sing worth a flip. So I try not to. I can't. I love to sing, but man, the only way that I can really sing is if I'm on a dance floor and the music's real high and really loud and everyone else is dancing. And I love to sing. I love to do karaoke, but I'm not good. I want to be very clear. Like I have many talents, but singing is not one of those talents. My entire family, grandma, in her infinite wisdom, this is a true story. Grandma said, "We are so bad at singing that we don't need to subject ourselves to ourselves." And grandma cuts for the family. So we Gregorian chant happy birthday because we're so bad that she decided that we were literally subjecting ourselves to torture by singing as a family. So we Gregorian chant happy birthday. So that is, I'm not kidding. It really freaked out my husband when he first came in. And I'm like, Kevin, you're going to hear some chanting for happy birthday. And he's like, what? What are you talking about? And then he looked over at me and I looked at him while we were going, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. And my husband's looking over at me like, what did I get myself into? So I will not, for the sake of your viewer base, I will not, and for the sake of yourself and myself included, because grandma is like, we are that bad. I will happily enjoy you singing to ABBA while I kind of mouth along the words and dance along in the background. But I shall not participate because it's that bad. I am that bad.
Well, we will have a virtual dance party with costumes. Okay. We're going to make that deal now and we'll just play the music in the background and you and I can dance.
I
Right.
love that. Yay. This is my favorite thing in the whole world to do. I love to dance. I'm highly dyspraxic. I cannot move my body in a way that is any way other than just I'm a really I love to dance. So I am highly about this. But you just, going in dancing with no judgment is of myself mainly is what I love to do. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to dance uh, with no judgment attached to it. And I'm also not a very good dancer.
Me either. So yeah, we're in good company. So in love again. Thank you so Leo. I really, really appreciate you being on the show. And for our listeners, I encourage you to go to Cleo's website and listen to her album because just stunning to do. Thanks so much, you guys. We'll see you on the next